Welcome back for another deep dive, where we take your source material and just really get to the heart of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And today we are talking about Liane Moriarty's Here One Moment. And this book is,
Oh, yeah.
this one's really something.
He really is.
It's not just a light beach read.
No.
It's got some serious depth about how we as humans try to make sense of this crazy thing called life,
Yeah.
especially when
Yeah.
we're faced with uncertainty. And
Yeah, and Moriarty, I think, has a real knack for taking, situations that feel so ordinary and turning them into these really profound explorations of the human psyche.
yeah, and in this case, it all starts with Cherry. She's this seemingly ordinary woman who's on a flight from Hobart to Sydney,
Right.
and suddenly she starts predicting people's death.
Just out of the blue.
It causes the whole shebang.
Yeah, the whole 9 yards.
Talk about an unsettling flight experience.
Oh, absolutely.
But here's where it gets really interesting for me. It's not so much the predictions themselves, but how everyone reacts to them, Some are terrified, some are dismissive, some even try to find the humor in it. You've got Paula, who is absolutely convinced that she can outsmart fate.
Right.
And prevent her son's predicted drowning.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's Ethan, who is told that he will be assaulted when he turns 30.
Oh, gosh.
And he just becomes consumed by this impending sense of doom, So
It's like she's really tapping into, like, our deepest anxieties about the future. Like,
Yeah.
are we actually in control of our lives, or are we just kind of, like, at the mercy of fate?
yes, and how much power do our beliefs actually have over what happens to us?
Exactly.
Right, because let's face it, we all try to predict the future in some way or another.
We do.
Right? We make plans, we set goals, we worry about what might go wrong. But what if we were actually given a glimpse into what's to come? I mean, would it liberate us or would it just totally paralyze us?
That is the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's really what's at the heart of this whole novel. And I think Moriarty does such a good job of exploring that. Take Philippa, for example.
Yeah.
She's told that she has a limited lifespan.
Right.
And so she makes these really radical changes. Quits her job. She finds love.
Yeah.
So was she always on that path, or did the prediction act as like a catalyst?
That's what I kept going back and forth on with this one. On one hand, maybe she was already subconsciously unhappy, but she needed that push to make a change,
Right.
But then on the other hand, maybe it was the prediction itself that made her feel like she had nothing to lose.
Yeah.
It's like this self-fulfilling prophecy in a way.
It is, exactly. And that's where her exploration of the power of belief, I think, gets really fascinating.
Yes.
Because even if Cherry's predictions weren't objectively true, the mere act of believing them seems to have had such a profound impact on these people's actions and ultimately their destinies.
And it's not just about those dramatic life or death predictions either.
Right.
There's also this really subtle exploration of the everyday anxieties that we all carry around,
Yeah.
like Paula and her fixation on her son's safety.
Yes.
Even before the prediction, she was already a worrier. So the question is, did Cherry just amplify these existing anxieties?
Right.
Or did she plant a seed that then grew into something much, much bigger,
And that's what I think is so key for our listener, too. It's so worth reflecting on, how much of our future is shaped by our beliefs,
Yeah.
our fears.
Our hopes.
Even our hopes, yeah, because sometimes those things can be just as powerful as any kind of external force.
Oh, absolutely. Here, One Moment really doesn't shy away from the darker side of that,
No, it doesn't.
We see characters making choices out of fear, out of desperation, even out of this desire to try to control the uncontrollable, and that leads to some pretty devastating consequences.
It does, which brings us to Cherry herself. I mean, here's a woman who is grappling not only with the potential truth of these predictions, but also the ethical weight of it all.
Oh, yeah.
Can she really be held responsible for the choices that people make based on what she said, even if she didn't intend to cause harm?
What struck me is how ordinary Cherry seems at first. This isn't some mystical fortune teller
Right?
draped in scarves and,
Yeah, with the crystal ball.
Yeah, she's a kangaroo counter-turned-actuary, for goodness sake.
I mean,
Does that make her predictions even more unsettling?
it does.
Or does it make them more human, more relatable in a way?
I think it's both.
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, it makes this possibility of having this gift, seem more accessible, more grounded in reality.
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, it raises this question of whether any of us could really handle that kind of knowledge, that kind of responsibility.
And that's where Cherry's backstory, I think, really comes into play.
Yes.
We learn about her really complicated relationship with her mother, Madame May,
Right.
who is this very flamboyant fortune teller.
Yes, very much so.
And Cherry grew up skeptical of her mother's abilities, really trying to distance herself from that world.
Yeah.
But then this whole experience on the plane throws her right back into it.
It's like she can't escape it.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if we can ever truly escape the influence of our upbringing, even when we actively try to forge our own path.
Yeah, and for Cherry, it's not just her mother's legacy that she's dealing with, it's also the loss of her partner, Ned, which adds another layer of grief and complexity to her story.
Absolutely.
And I think his character, really adds another dimension to this whole idea of fate and choice because he's, this very impulsive life of the party kind of guy.
Yes.
Which is a stark contrast to Cherry's more cautious nature. And it makes me wonder, do we seek out partners who balance us out? Or do we seek out partners who actually reflect our deepest fears or desires?
That is such a good question. And it's so interesting to see how their dynamic plays out in their relationship.
Yes.
Both positive and negative ways.
Right.
Like you see Ned encouraging Cherry to step outside of her comfort zone.
Yeah, to embrace spontaneity.
Exactly.
But at the same time, his impatience kind of clashes with her tendency to just overthink everything.
It does.
And then after Ned's sudden death, you really see the full weight of those what-ifs and regrets that Cherry's left carrying.
You do. And I think those notebooks of his where he wrote down, one good thing every day become so poignant.
Oh, they're heartbreaking.
They are. It's like this reminder to appreciate the present moment.
Yes.
To focus on those simple joys, even when life just feels really overwhelming.
Yes. And it's almost as if Moriarty is offering us, the readers, a similar exercise.
Yeah.
Like, what are the good things that we might be taking for granted?
Yes.
How can we live more fully in the present? Even with the knowledge that the future is always uncertain.
Such a powerful takeaway, I think.
It really speaks to, I think, this universal search for meaning that runs through this entire book. Because even in the midst of all the chaos and uncertainty that these characters are facing, they're constantly trying to make sense of it all.
They are.
They're trying to find their purpose, to connect with something larger than themselves, to leave their mark on the world in some way.
Absolutely. And I think that resonates with so many of us, especially in today's world where everything just feels so fast-paced and uncertain. I think we're all kind of searching for that sense of grounding, that sense of purpose.
And here, one moment really challenges us to examine how we're going about that search. Are we chasing after external validation? Are we trying to control every single outcome? Or are we willing to embrace the unknown, to trust our intuition, and to find meaning in the connections that we forge along the way?
Yeah, that's a great way to frame it. And I think those are questions that are going to stay with our listeners long after they finish this book.
Yeah,
Because ultimately, Here One Moment isn't about finding all the answers.
Yeah.
It's about asking the right questions, about being willing to sit with discomfort and to embrace the complexity of human experience.
I completely agree. And while we've only just scratched the surface of this book, I think we've already unearthed some pretty profound insights.
We have.
But there's still so much more to explore.
Oh, there is.
So for part 2 of this deep dive, we're going to delve deeper into those individual journeys of self-discovery, those moments of connection and heartbreak, and the ultimate question of whether any of us can truly outrun fate. So stay tuned.
I can't wait. One thing that really struck me as we were talking about Here One Moment is how it explores this idea of shared experiences. And I don't just mean like, the passengers on that flight.
Oh, I see where you're going with this. It's like those ripple effects.
Exactly.
But on a much bigger scale.
Exactly, because, while Cherry's at the center of it all, she's also a catalyst for all these interconnected stories.
Right.
That kind of weave together these themes of lost regret and second chances.
Yeah, and it's not just about those big dramatic life changes like Philippa quitting her job, you know. There are these smaller, quieter moments of connection that feel just as powerful.
Absolutely, like Paula and Eve bonding over their anxieties at the cathedral, or Cherry and Allegra, the flight attendant.
Yes.
Finding common ground in their vulnerability.
It's like these seemingly random encounters suddenly become charged with so much meaning.
Yeah.
Because of what they've all experienced with Cherry. And it makes me think about how, our own lives are full of these chance meetings, these little moments that could easily pass us by, but maybe they hold more significance than we realize.
And Here One Moment really challenges us to pay attention to those moments, to be open to the possibility that even the most fleeting encounters can have a lasting impact.
Yeah, and sometimes those impacts are messy and complicated, just like real life.
They are.
Take Leo and Neve, for example.
Oh, yeah.
They're this seemingly successful couple,
On the surface.
but under the surface, there's a lot of tension.
Yeah, a lot going on there.
He's this driven architect. She's put her own career on hold to raise their kids, and they're both carrying around these unspoken resentments. And then Sherry's prediction about Leo just throws a wrench into everything.
It really does.
It forces them to confront these issues that they've been avoiding and to reevaluate what really matters.
Exactly.
It's almost like her prediction becomes this wake-up call, this reminder that life is short.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't waste it on these petty arguments or unfulfilled dreams.
It's true. And it makes you think about how sometimes we need those external jolts,
Yes.
those moments of crisis to shake us out of complacency.
Yes.
And force us to look at our lives with fresh eyes.
Yeah, because it's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day grind,
Seriously.
to prioritize work or obligations over the things that actually bring us joy. And sometimes it takes a dramatic event or even just a thought-provoking book to make us realize that we have the power to change course.
Absolutely. And I think Here One Moment offers us these glimpses into how different people cope with that realization. Some, like Paula, become fixated on controlling every detail, trying to outsmart fate itself.
Right.
Others, like Ethan, initially just spiral into this fear and self-destruction before eventually finding a way to move forward.
Yeah, it's like Moriarty showing us that there's no right or wrong way to process these big existential questions,
Right.
We all have our own coping mechanisms, our own ways of making sense of the world.
It's true. And it's in those individual journeys,
Yeah.
those moments of vulnerability and self-discovery that I think this book really shines.
Yes.
Because even though these characters are grappling with these extraordinary circumstances,
Right.
their struggles just feel so human, so relatable.
And for me, it's Cherry's journey that really stayed with me because she's not just dealing with the fallout of her predictions.
Right.
She's also confronting her own past, her own family legacy. And in a way, she represents that struggle that we all have.
Between who we are and who we think we're supposed to be.
Exactly. She's this walking contradiction.
Yes.
A kangaroo counter-turned actuary
Yeah.
might also have psychic abilities.
Right, yeah.
It's like she's trying to reconcile all these different parts of herself
Yes.
to find a way to integrate, her logic-driven mind with her intuitive side.
And I think that's something a lot of people can relate to.
Absolutely.
We live in a society that so often values rationality over intuition.
Yes,
But deep down, we all have that gut feeling.
we do.
That inner voice that whispers truths that we might try to ignore.
And Here One Moment encourages us to listen to that voice.
Yes.
To acknowledge that there are things in this world that we might not fully understand,
Right.
but that doesn't make them any less real or powerful.
Exactly. And even if we don't have all the answers, even if we can't predict the future,
Right.
we still have the power to choose how we respond,
They do.
how we connect, and how we make meaning in the face of all this uncertainty.
And I think that's a really empowering message. It is.
Because it reminds us that even when life throws us curveballs,
Yes.
we're not just passive bystanders.
No.
We have agency, we have resilience, and we have the capacity to create a life that feels authentic and meaningful, even with all the unknowns.
And that brings me back to something you mentioned earlier about those smaller, quieter moments of connection.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about the big dramatic decisions,
Right.
It's also about those everyday interactions, those acts of kindness and compassion that weave together the fabric of our lives.
Like those notebooks of Ned's,
Yeah.
where he found something good to focus on each day. It's a reminder that even in the midst of chaos and uncertainty, there's always something to be grateful for, something to celebrate, something to connect us to the present moment.
Exactly. And I think that's a really powerful message to leave our listener with. Because while Here One Moment might not offer us this clear roadmap
Yeah.
for how to navigate life's uncertainties,
Yeah.
it does offer a reminder that even in the face of the unknown, we have the power to choose hope,
Yes.
to choose connection, and to choose to live a life that feels full and meaningful, one good moment at a time.
One moment at a time.
As we've been talking about Here One Moment, I keep coming back to this idea of regret.
Oh, yeah.
Because so many of these characters are grappling with those what ifs and those should have dones,
It's almost like Moriarty is holding up this mirror to our own mortality
Yeah.
and forcing us to kind of confront those uncomfortable questions about, how we're spending our time.
Right, and it's not just about those big life choices like, Philippa staying in a marriage for too long.
Right.
It's also about the smaller, everyday regrets,
Yeah.
The missed opportunities for connection, the kind words left unspoken, the moments that we just let slip away because we were too busy or too afraid.
Like those notebooks of Ned's,
Oh my
filled
God.
with his one good thing entries.
Yeah.
It's such a poignant reminder to savor those little joys.
Yeah.
To appreciate the people in our lives while we can.
It really is, and it made me reflect on my own relationships. Do you think we often wait for a crisis or a loss to make us truly appreciate what we have?
That's a really good question, and I don't know that there's an easy answer.
Yeah.
But I think here one moment certainly suggests that sometimes it takes that jolt to our system,
Yeah.
to really wake us up to what matters.
And sometimes those jolts come in the form of these really unexpected encounters.
Right.
Like the one that sets this whole novel in motion.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine being on that flight with Cherry?
Oh my gosh.
Hearing those predictions, it would be terrifying.
It would.
But it would also be this incredible catalyst for introspection.
It would be like she throws this grenade into everyone's carefully constructed realities.
Oh, I know.
And it forces them to question everything.
Yes, their beliefs, their priorities, even their sense of self.
Exactly. And that's where I think her exploration of belief gets really, really interesting. Because even if Cherry's predictions weren't, objectively true,
Right.
the mere act of believing them seemed to have this ripple effect.
It did.
Changing the course of people's lives.
It's like the placebo effect, but on a much grander scale.
It is.
The belief itself becomes this force that shapes perceptions.
Yes.
And influences decisions.
It does. And it makes you wonder how much of our own reality is shaped by what we choose to believe.
Oh, for sure.
Are we more susceptible to suggestion than we'd like to admit?
Probably. And that brings us back to this idea of taking ownership of our choices, Because even if we're influenced by external factors, even if we make mistakes or we have regrets,
Right.
we still have the power to course correct.
Yeah, we do.
To learn from those experiences and create a future that aligns with our values.
Exactly. And that's where those themes of forgiveness and second chances, I think, come into play.
Yes.
Because here one moment isn't about judging these characters for their flaws or their missteps.
Mm.
It's about showing how they grapple with those imperfections.
Yeah, how they try to make amends.
Exactly.
And how they ultimately find a way to move forward.
Yes. And there's this beautiful thread of resilience, I think, that runs through the entire book.
Oh, absolutely.
Even when faced with loss and heartbreak and uncertainty,
Yeah.
these characters find ways to pick themselves up.
Yeah, to lean on each other.
Exactly.
To find those flickers of hope and joy in the midst of all the darkness.
And that resilience isn't about, denying the pain or pretending that everything is okay.
Right.
It's about acknowledging those challenges, embracing vulnerability, and finding the strength to keep going even when it's hard.
And I think that's such a powerful message for anyone who's going through a difficult time,
It is.
Because here one moment reminds us that we're not alone in our struggles,
Mm.
that there's beauty to be found even in those broken pieces,
Yes.
and that we all have this capacity to heal, to grow, and to create a more meaningful life on the other side of hardship.
Absolutely. And I think that one of the most important takeaways from this book is the importance of connection,
Yes.
because even though these characters are facing these really individual challenges,
Right.
they find so much strength and solace in their relationships with each other.
Like Cherry and her Aunt Pat, finding their way back to each other after years of estrangement.
Yes. Or Paula and Eve supporting each other through those anxieties and fears.
It's a reminder that we're not meant to go through life alone,
We're not.
We need those human connections to help us navigate the ups and downs.
Mm-hmm.
And that sometimes the most unexpected encounters can lead to the most profound friendships.
They can. And, those connections don't have to be grand or dramatic.
No.
Sometimes it's just about those small acts of kindness.
Yes.
Those moments of shared laughter, those simple gestures that remind us that we're part of something bigger than ourselves.
Like those one good thing entries.
Exactly.
They weren't about changing the world.
Right.
They were about finding the beauty in those everyday moments.
Yes.
The simple joys that connect us to the present and to each other.
That's what it's all about.
And I think that's such a beautiful message to end on,
It is.
Because here one moment, might not give us that roadmap for how to navigate life's uncertainties,
Right.
but it does remind us that even in the face of the unknown, we have the power to choose love, to choose connection, and to choose to find meaning in those moments that make up a life. So to our listener, as you continue on your own journey, remember to savor those moments, embrace the unexpected, and cherish the connections that make life worth living. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.